and I'm going to shift gears just a little bit because we want to focus on amateurs this show. But I want to transition that way by what I saw on Max Vohland's Instagram. First off, he's switching to Fox gear, which that goes back to amateurs. Amateur parents, please don't go to these gear companies and say, "Oh yeah, we'll be loyal forever," because you won't. You're just not going
No.
to. When you go pro, you're going to go with what the team says or who has the biggest check. So don't go to those parents and do that. But what I really found cool about Max Vohland is what he does, and he's one of those riders that has just a unique skill set, kind of like a Jet Lawrence, where they do weird things with the bike. And how it happens is he's at a skate park right now. This is a factory rider at a skate park with kids, airing out some weird sideways thing. And I'll put a video up here on if we do this one on YouTube. And I'm just like, wow, that is the way to practice. And I'm a big fan of your guy, Logan Best. He is one of the hardest workers. He is just mentally strong. He's a badass. I truly believe he needs to spend more time doing things like that at the skate park, and he will be dynamite. And I think rather than worry about your kids getting hurt at the skate park, let them go play, let them be kids, let them learn those skills, and they'll be shocked how much it actually pays off in their moto riding.
Well, take your thread of thought just a little bit further. Cole Seeley shreds on a BMX bike. Jeremy McGrath grew up on a BMX bike. Max Vohland obviously shreds on a mountain bike, a BMX bike, the list goes on. What did, in Whiskey Throttle talks a lot about this when they bring some of these past champions. What did they do? They actually went out and rode in the dunes. They free rode. You know, we got Justin Hill coming back into the sport. What is him and his brother Josh all about? Hitting those big gaps, right? Just play riding, just throwing the bike around, not being afraid to get loose on the bike. But I know, I'm just not going to mince words. These amateur kids, a lot of them are told, you know, don't do this, you're going to get hurt. Don't do that, you're going to get hurt. Don't do that. Sure, there's some legitimacy to it.
Yeah.
But you listen to these veterans talk about it on Whiskey Throttle, etc. And what do they say? There's no fun. It's very robotic. It's very corporate. Yes, I know the money's come a long way, et cetera, but at some point.
Well, how many times have I said, don't waste all this money on amateurs. Just use it in the pros. That's it. Give these guys 3 years. Let the amateurs be amateurs. That's what they are. They shouldn't be making a salary and living off of racing at that point in their life. I understand that's kind of, what's that?
It's never going to change. It's never going to change. But see, here's the thing. You could have a guy that's an absolute punk on the field or the basketball court or whatever, football, baseball, right? And be an absolute asshole. And then the team owners are like, I'm done dealing with you. Somebody else scoops them right up. Why? Because they're good at ball, you know? And that's the challenge you run into is if you're not going to support them because you're going to make a stand that you're not going to support amateurs, unfortunately, there's somebody else there that will. And it's just getting younger and younger and younger. And I not to pick on Kawasaki because I like Ryan Holiday. He does a fantastic job. The biggest question is, like, you look at the Rider D, you look at the I don't know why I always forget the other one. You have Rider D and
Jet Reynolds.
I don't know why, for the love of God, I cannot remember those two when I talk to him about them at the same time. But, you know, plagued with a lot of injuries. Is that, you know, people hit me up, is he burnt out? I don't know. I've never been behind the scenes to see what his training schedule is like. I don't know what his training schedule has been like for the last 5 years, but we've seen a lot of those two guys on 85s racing a lot of hype, a lot of pressure put on them. And then, you know, we don't see that manifest itself. The only person that's come out of that Team Green program has been Seth Hammaker, that's been able to go the distance.
And he wasn't full in on the program like those two. Like those two were day one factory. Like Seth was, I mean, he was wearing fly gear and he was part of it, but not completely.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it was like those last 2 years before he went pro. And like, to your point, how much money has been spent on Rider D and Jet from 85 days. I don't know if they had the KX65 racing at that time or not, but it's a lot of money. And I don't know that it's going to come to fruition. I hope it does, for the sake of those two riders and their families, because they've got a lot of sweat equity in there. I hope it comes to fruition, but it doesn't look very promising right now. And some people are like, well, he's flying. I'm not talking about his speed. I'm talking about how many injuries he's had, because as we said earlier, the plaguing of pre-existing injuries is what unfortunately becomes the demise of some of our top guys.
Yeah. And that's when I look at a kid like Cade Johnson, who got some wins at Ponca, did really well. He's from Utah. He signed with Yamaha when they developed their 65, and he's been a factory rider since then. I wonder, I hope they're taking, and I don't know him real well, so, or at all, but I hope that they take a kid like that who's super talented and let him get the rest and, you know, let him develop on his own. Because I mean, your kids, those joints change. I mean, when you gain 6 inches in a year, it puts a lot of pressure on different parts of your body that sometimes just need more rest.
Yeah, obviously I've got an affinity towards Yamaha and Donnie and all they've done with Logan Best and stuff. Guys at Triangle Yamaha have done a phenomenal job. And what I do like about the conversations is they do talk. It's not a dictatorship. You know, Donnie, he does ask questions like that. You know, how you feeling? Where are we going? Again, I've not been in all the conversations with him. I just like the way that Yamaha runs their amateur program. They like to get a lot of feedback. They seem to work amongst themselves in more of a long-term development side. Now, can I say that Donnie and those guys play a significant role in Star Yamaha success? I'm going to say yes, because at least when those Yamaha riders have gotten there, they're not already a chewed up piece of meat, you know? So you got to give credit where credit is due. Logan's fresh and ready to go.
You know, how many days should
this,
athletes or regular gym goers schedule for rest days in their program?
That's a great question. And there's not a definitive answer to it. And the reason being is it's all about your ability to recover. So if you are taking notes on this subject, what I always say is write down that overtraining is not how much you do. It's your inability to absorb what you do. I've got professional triathletes that train 30 hours a week. If I were to take that volume of training and put it on a professional motocross racer, that would be perceived as overtraining because they're not, the specificity of it is not there. I could take somebody that races in Logan's class that I've had the privilege of working with for 4 years, okay, 5 years. I know what volume Logan has done year over year over year over year over year. So that's why with our clients, we always do a baseline assessment just to figure out where the opportunities of weakness are mentally and physically. But on top of that, that's what we evaluate is how quickly can they recover. We have some different metrics that we use to evaluate it. It's beyond the scope of tonight's show, but we have 4 or 5 definitive variables that we look at that evaluate recovery. So to answer your question, I adjust it based on after I get about 6 to 8 weeks of a client on a consistent training schedule, you then can make a decision. And I'll give you an example. We have a young triathlete, 19 years old, firing on all 8 cylinders. You wouldn't, you know, my point is what I mean by all 8 cylinders, no signs of adrenal fatigue. For the listeners, adrenal fatigue would be craving simple sugars, night sweats, tired and not able to sleep, and low sex drive. So if you have one or all of those, that's an external sign of adrenal fatigue. Well, this 19-year-old guy doesn't have any of that. But there were enough variables that I said, his name is Chris. I said, Chris, let's go ahead. His rest day historically was always on a Monday. And I said, let's go ahead and add a rest day on Friday. Again, beyond the scope of the show, why we would do that. But there were some variables. I said, you know what? Let's get a little bit more out of your weekend workouts by adding a second. He was pissed, absolutely pissed, because he's highly competitive like our listeners. And he took it as, oh, you don't think I can handle the volume? I said, no. Let's just try it for 3 weeks. And then in the 4th week, we did another round of assessments. I said, let's try it for 3 weeks. He had an 11% increase in performance by adding a second rest day.
Wow.
11%.
Wow.
Because his body is producing so much testosterone, and his body, when he's a good sleeper, he gets a good 4 to 5 sleep cycles. Deep sleep is around the 2-hour mark. He's releasing a lot of those recovery hormones like human growth hormone, HGH. He's releasing enough testosterone. He is recovering. Now we're balancing food versus burn rate and all that other stuff. This is a young man that didn't, when I first said it to him, I thought he was going to fire me as an elite coach. He's like, you don't think I can handle the volume? I said, no. You've shown that you can handle the volume. I think we need to absorb a little bit more of the work you're putting in. And as a result, I mean, he's loving it now because he's not afraid to do the work, but he's also not afraid to rest. And I can't emphasize, if you study the Ethiopian run, the Kenyan runners, they understand the value of rest. And there's a reason why they're about to break the 2-hour barrier for the marathon, because yes, they work hard, but they rest hard as well. So it's a good, great question from Sam. Test some variables. You know, everybody needs to do their own. Don't get caught up on this bullshit of somebody post on Instagram or Facebook or other some social media outlet trying to, you know, hey, this is what I did today. I would take it all with a very, very small grain of salt. There's a lot of embellishment of information. Oh, I haven't taken a break in 6 months. You know, bullshit. It's you're a human. You're not a machine or a robot. So test, evaluate, test and evaluate, but you have to know what you're looking for. So it's a great question. Good.